If you look at the bass amp, we used a little bit of drive on the bass in this particular case or whatever. We had we used the Keeley modded tube screamer, and it keeps some low end, solid on there. But if you look, there's not a lot of dynamics in the bass. This is the same riff the whole song, and this is the one we've already done. And you notice it's pretty blocked out. I like L2 for bass. L1's great for drums. I think it feels a little crunchier. These are like detail type things. L2's got a, for bass and guitar, it's got an auto release control function that I think is really useful. Similar deal. Those of you who have waves and who've messed with waves know. So it has this ARC. You don't have to experiment with the release of the actual limiting or compression it's doing to the file. You can actually it actually does a great job of just figuring out what it should be on its own. Of course, there again, you'll see you want to listen to it. So you don't want to absolutely crush it. I'm just kind of, like I said, I'm just kind of maximizing the level and just trimming down these. I guess you wouldn't call it necessarily the transient of the note, but the loudest portion of the bass. This makes, it's real essential to bass a lot of times with rock, especially distorted guitar stuff, that the bass is really controlled dynamically. So you can always hear the bass note so that it sits solidly in the mix and it plays well with the drums and stuff. And a lot of people are like, I've heard people like, man, you're just really killing all the dynamics. I'm like, you're doing the exact same thing when you run your compressor. A lot of people turn their compressor, they're showing like 20 dB of gain reduction, and it's like, it's the same thing, it's just the compressor's less efficient. And it's also changing the sound. I'm doing the same work and not changing the sound hardly at all.
Yeah.
I probably should have let you hear before. Sounds the same, it's just louder.
Yeah.
It's rhythm guitar also. If you notice, there's no dynamics. In distorted guitar. Now, obviously, if you're doing a style of music like acoustic, oriented stuff, no distorted guitar, or, jazz, or I don't know, like piano type music or orchestra or something like that, you really need to preserve the dynamics. This approach will not be great for that. You might be able to tighten up the louder portions just to give you some control or whatever, but a compressor would probably work better on that, because you're going to want something that, the compressor expander, you're going to want something that brings the quiet moments up a little bit and brings the loud moments down. This is kind of does that, but it's not. This is, I think, more appropriate for this. Application and to maximize the overall volume of the mix, The big difference here, or the big aspect of why this works and why this is good or whatever, is because it's loud distorted guitars, no dynamics. So you have to treat everything else accordingly to make it play well. Listen to it. Sounds the same, just louder. And by the way, this is, like I said, after we've noise stripped all the guitars. I think I've already talked about that, but. And I've cross-faded all my punch-ins. And let's pretend that I checked all that. Too much. Listen to this. Yeah, that evened out those attacks. I want to leave some dynamic in that because I don't want to completely crush out the sustain. It's part of that sound because it's a cleaner type tune. Might be too much. Through. That looks good to me. This is also a really good thing in terms of if someone else ends up mixing the record. Mm-hmm. If you process these types of things, it's less work for them.
Because it's actually already, like when you bounce the tracks,
yeah,
it's going to be in there.
Yeah, when I export the tracks, it's already going to be processed in Dynamics, and you'll see how I mix or whatever. Like I actually process the gain instead of I avoid automation. Mm-hmm. And if somebody's using Logic, obviously without the Digi Translator software, if you want to import files from say Pro Tools into Logic or into Cubase or something like that, the automation might not transfer and things of that nature, but this eliminates the automation. So you can import it and it's like, okay, he's kind of, the things are in the ballpark. So it's a time saver overall. I like DigiDesign's Maxim for vocals. I know it seems strange, but I did a lot of just trial and error to figure out what plugins I liked best on. Like I said, these are very subtle differences, but I feel this is going to blow people's minds, probably. You're going to be like, what? Check out the vocals. Look how much I'm actually.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah. Makes them kind of even.
So Jordan had a question about the guitars. Why wouldn't you just turn up the guitars rather than limiting them? They didn't seem to have a dynamic range anyways.
Yeah, I'll go back up here and say but yeah, this really doesn't do a lot to the tone.
Uh-huh.
But it does, like I said, if you look at the regular signal, these bumps here, it looks like the louder amplitude. This is the low end information. Mm-hmm. And actually, it actually tightens up the low end when you compress the loud, what looks amplitude-wise on the guitar track. There's very little dynamics, but there is a little bit of, when you palm mute and things like that, or you strum, there's actual boost in the lows. So when you actually compress or limit just a little bit, it tightens those lows up, makes them more controlled in the mix. Cool. I know Andy Sneap, he uses a C4 limiter with like just a little bit of compression on the lows to do the same thing. But this, like I said, since this doesn't change the tone, I can actually run this on this, and it pretty much is only compressing the lows and make it a little tighter. So it's turning up the guitar and it's compressing the lows a little bit. As you notice, like I said, this is quite extreme looking on the vocals. It's really evening out the vocals, which is really going to help us in the mix. And it makes the, I think a question in the last segment, someone was asking about the pronunciations, bringing those up. Yeah. This is what this does. And a lot of people were doing this by running hard compressions on their vocals, on their vocal bus or their individual tracks. They just don't see it. But the cool thing about this, let me, just for demonstration, I'll bring up a regular compressor and I'll show you what it does. And you can see how these two are different. Let's see, I'll find just a regular Digi. What is it called? Let's just use C1 here.
Why would you go section by section instead of going like per track?
Oh, you can go per track. The only problem is,
Is there a downside to that?
it just makes more space. Like I said, that this is data,
Yep.
computer,
Yep,
and it's just
that makes sense.
yeah. So it just makes I come from the old school, like when I started with Pro Tools, like, I had a $700 3 gig SCSI drive.
Yeah.
So, I'm still in that mindset, well, I need to save hard drive space, I need to save CPU. And nowadays, with the technology we have now, it's not as necessary.
And you think because you run the whole session on one,
Yeah.
or the whole record on one session,
Yeah.
that's another reason why you should really pay attention to CPU power and all?
Possibly, yeah. I think the new modern computers, I mean, they can handle crazy
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, we were just
Especially
talking
they're
about
made for
video.
video, yeah.
Yeah, video is intense in terms
Yeah.
of like the rendering and things of that nature. So,
Yeah.
Computers, these new, especially the Macs and the really super built PCs. I mean, they can handle like large processing and stuff like that. But it's still, like I said, I mean, I try to still keep my CPU low just so everything works efficiently. Because if you get a lot of files, big files, a lot of plugins going on, it's just going to start bogging down your session, and you might lose some productivity because of the. Let's see what this does. Let's see, here's like I said, here's a classic compressor, and it doesn't necessarily. This is not doing the auto sum thing. We have to program the makeup. We have to like manually, you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. But I just guessed, and it was pretty much right. But check out one thing it does with the transient information. See these spikes? Mm-hmm. So we're doing the same thing by compressing it with a traditional compressor. Right. It's even, but it's got these spikes because the attack. If we speed up the attack, yeah, see? It's the same thing. A lot of people, they run these on the bus, and so they freak out when they see me doing this. I'm like, dude, it's the same thing. It's a you are doing, in essence, the same type of deal or whatever when you're compressing. But like I said, this will actually have more of a sound and character than this. Plus, there's so many other settings you have to take in consideration and deal with. So I'm going to go through this quickly so we can get to
Sure.
mixing.
Do you leave dither on when you process the tracks?
In the are you talking about the specific plugins or?
Yeah. Yeah.
Usually I only run dither in my mastering.
Oh, okay. Like mastering effects.
Yeah, with the L2, whatever. I'll have this type 1 dither. Mm-hmm. I think if I understand dither correctly or whatever, like it takes away the non-linear aspect of the audio. Like I said, if you zoomed in super close, I mean, it's all ones and zeros with digital. So if you looked at the waveform, and it's, even if it looks kind of jagged or whatever, like I said, if you really zoomed in, this looks like a clean line, but really it's like stair step. Yeah. And dither kind of introduces distortions and stuff to that information that kind of makes it more like analog. Analog is not stair step. It's jagged and sine round, and so in the human ear that sounds more pleasant or more natural to what we ever accompany. Like I guess most people just think it sounds better. So that's what dither actually does. So the plugins that have it, I don't feel like it's necessary to add dither and then dither again and dither again. I feel like if you do multiple stages of dither, it might actually take away from your clarity. And I don't know, because I honestly can't hear a big, huge. I don't turn dither on and off and like, oh, that's crazy different. But I just leave it on the final final maximizer or whatever.
Cool.
I noticed one thing about. And of course, we can get in this talking about pseudo mastering, but there's devices out there like BB Sonic Maximizer that emulates what tubes and transformers do and adds harmonic distortions. But that particular product actually does a low end phase alignment where it delays. I think it delays the high end so that the lows and highs meet your ear at the same time. Because naturally, the high end hits your ear first or something, I think. And so you definitely don't want to do like a sonic maximizer on one track that does the phase correction thing and then use it again later on the master bus. Then it's back off time the other way, you know, or like the phase. It's a subtle thing, but it makes a difference in the final. Gotta really know what you're dealing with sometimes with some of these specialized processors. Like there's some, you know, the Arl Exciter. I think I think Zach was joking about that, or someone the other day. Or maybe it was Finn. I think Finn was joking about that. But like nobody knows really what it does. Just has a cool name. Okay, this track was pretty simple to do. Like I said, I've gone through and I've pretty much evened out the dynamics, took out the loud dynamics, and you know, unfortunately, it's hard to demonstrate on this song, like I said, because there's not a lot of like super low dynamic parts. This song's rides pretty evenly throughout or whatever. But you know, obviously, with a song like a track like Between the Buried and Me's or whatever, you got 8-minute songs and you got various dynamics. You got it starts off super soft. Which hardly any of this would be going on, any of this limiting. And then you break into a rocking part, out of nowhere, and then, it's going to be pretty limited and even and whatever. That, so you want to allow some dynamics to be there. Mm-hmm. But this particular song, not a lot of dynamics, so, outside the verse kind of dialing back or whatever. And like I said, Tommy's achieving this also in his choice of texturing and layering of guitars. Like he's got the full-blown distortion guitars, in the mode of introduction of the song, and then he's got the same riff coming back in the chorus, and then he's actually using a thinner, cleaner guitar, a little more dynamic type of instrumentation in the verse. So you get the dynamics in the selection of the tones, in the amount, in the layering, and then also here in a minute, like we'll get dynamics. We'll actually build in the dynamics in the mix, just by simply turning stuff up or down.